Well, it's Sunday. Hopefully everyone's enjoying their weekend. Typically, I'd have some sort of tech video to put up today, but looks like UPS and FedEx decided I had to wait an extra week. I'm still on a PlayStation 2 kick right now, and a lot of you seem to enjoy the video I did recently on the system, so I wanted to go a step further with it and do all kinds of hardware things to it, maybe add Wi-Fi or put an SSD in it and maybe do some work on the fan itself. So I got a lot of plans for that fat PlayStation 2 system. Hopefully by next weekend we can do all that. But something else popped up that kind of goes along with this PlayStation 2 theme, as it appears that there are some serious milestones being reached, some major progress when it comes to hacking and the homebrew scene around the PlayStation 4 and the PlayStation 5. And believe it or not, it comes back to the PS2, and we're going to take a quick look at that here today. Guys, if you enjoy these videos, make sure that like button helps out a ton. And if new here to the SpawnWave channel, make sure you subscribe down below. And we're going to start today with this video sponsor that's helping to fund the entire PS2 project. Today's video is sponsored by Factor. Eating nutritious meals on a daily basis can be tough with a busy schedule, especially when it comes to shopping, preparing, and cleaning up afterwards. Factor takes the stress and time out of the equation with meals that come together in just a few minutes. Choose between keto, calorie smart, chef's choice, vegan options, and more to be delivered right to your door, letting you skip the lines at the grocery store. The menu of over 25 meals rotates weekly, so there's always something new to try. I like taking Factor meals with me to the office since it cuts out time spent ordering out, and I'm able to have a meal ready in just a few minutes so I can get on with my day. It also takes the guesswork out of what I'm eating with all the ingredients and nutrition details clearly labeled on the back. Head to go.factor75.com/SpawnWave130 and use code SpawnWave130 to get $130 off across 6 boxes. That's go.factor75.com/SpawnWave130 and use code SpawnWave130 to get $130 off across 6 boxes. Thanks once again to Factor for sponsoring today's video. So big shout out to Factor helping out there, and I'm excited to get back to that PlayStation 2 when the stuff decides to show up in the mail. But let's head over here. This was posted up by CTurt, and I saw MVG talking about this one a bit because there is some other stuff we have to look forward to, as it appears this is kind of being released in parts. Now, we've talked many times about the bounty program, which is a way for larger companies to essentially see how their security measures stack up, and if there are exploits that are found and proven to be serious issues, even like minor ones technically, will have some sort of payout. So if you find an issue or some sort of security loophole or something, say even a 3DS or a PlayStation 4 or 5, you can submit that to Nintendo, Sony, or whoever, and they'll pay you money. And we've seen some pretty sizable payouts at times. We're talking tens of thousands of dollars, because to them, it's a drop in the bucket and could potentially stop millions of dollars worth of losses there. But this one is interesting because it apparently was submitted like a year ago, and it's to the point now where CTurt is actually just disclosing it to the public, going over how they managed to load up forms of homebrew on a PlayStation 4, and apparently this could work on the PS5 and is unpatchable. They say hacking the PS4 and PS5 through the PS2 emulator, which, of course, with PlayStation Plus Premium, there is that classic tier that's just kind of sitting there that has PlayStation 2 games. Even though they're kind of remasters, they're still running through an emulator, and it's been like that on the PlayStation 4 as well. I played through Rogue Galaxy on my PS4. It was a pretty good experience, but I used a PS2 emulator to do that. And it looks like CTurt decided to home in on that PlayStation 2 emulator in order to find some sort of way in to run privileged code. They say escaping it would grant the ability to run pirated PS2 games on the PS4, PS5, and potentially also the PSN cloud gaming service. That's an interesting thing to consider there. And the thing that's pointed out here by CTurt is, in order to achieve this, you need a game that can be exploited, and there are just PS2 games right now on the service, and ones you can buy and just put on your system. Yeah, they're digital, but for the most part, you're able to run them even when offline. So that means if you download, say, Okage, as is shown here, you can actually work to break free of some of the limitations from the emulator and do things like run unsigned code. They say the PS2 emulator is some of the last remaining JIT privileged code on the PS5, and they do talk about it being unpatchable here, with a lot of that being that the game itself is what's exploitable. They say digital or physical, and it'd be difficult for PlayStation to remove your access to it. The console is only designed to enforce updates for the operating system, but no mechanisms to enforce patches for games. So you can still boot up a game on an older version of it, and it'll work fine. You don't necessarily have to patch it. In this case, they say you can actually like downgrade them by proxying PSN traffic. This entire write-up is absolutely fascinating to see. I mean, they go explicit detail on all of this, how they were able to achieve it, why they chose even Okage, and what they were able to accomplish here, which, funny enough, there's a video showing CTURT do this. What happened is, after escaping the PS2 emulator, they sent Klonoa 2 over Wi-Fi to the PS4, and apparently it took a while. It was like 20 minutes or something to send a couple of gigabytes. So not the most practical thing right now, but it was able to load it up. Now, the issue with this is each instance of that emulator attached to these games is set up to run that game specifically. So it's not going to run Klonoa 2 as well as it's running Okage, because there are a bunch of settings in the background that have been flipped and moved around to play Okage the best way possible. I will say, though, in its current state, this does not seem to be the easiest or most practical exploit to pull off, as CTURT had to use an already hacked PlayStation 4 in order to sign a modified save file for Okage so that they could run and exploit the game itself. So this isn't something where it's going to be like, oh, download this file, put it on USB, drop it in, you're good to go. Seems like there's a bit more setup to this whole thing. And they discuss kind of how they would move games over and what are some of the possibilities there. Bundling with a save file initially seems like the obvious choice, but the PS4 save games have a file size limit about 1 gigabyte is what they mentioned here. And you could probably, they say, move it off of USB storage by manually porting over a USB and FAT implementation. But going through Wi-Fi just seemed to be a pretty straightforward way to test everything here. And all of this is just showing that it's very much in its infancy now. In fact, this is just the part 1 conclusion, kind of a, hey, the PS2 piracy, it's a fun implication, being able to disclose it despite there being no patch. But my main goal was getting native homebrew applications running, because at this time, you could write PS4 enhanced PS2 homebrew applications. So you could use native PS4 functionality, as is mentioned here, but you're still kind of limited right now in the sense of it being in that PS2 emulator. However, there is a part 2 when it comes to the arbitrary code execution, and that's sort of led to speculation now if this goes to something like the PlayStation 3, or if there is more to this story overall. Like, could they have actually been able to run unsigned code outside of this and have the PS4 PS5 just be blown wide open with some sort of jailbreak? And that's where things get a little tricky for Sony, because we have seen some pretty concerted efforts to open up the PS5 already, and a lot of that goes through the PlayStation 4. It seems like we've heard about how the Blu-ray drive even was an issue. Like, that is a way to hack the PlayStation 5 and do different things to it that is not allowed in the operating system. And that's essentially what we're seeing right now, is kind of a scramble to have some sort of entry point in order to run homebrew. And that's where everything starts. And I mean, I'll say the PS5 being in the kind of demand it is now, it being a pretty interesting system when it comes to the internals and the technical features, you're going to see a pretty sizable push like this from the homebrew community. And, of course, people looking into security for the bounty program. Doesn't hurt to get paid at the same time. And at this point, what we need is for MVG to get back here from Australia. He needs to talk about this in depth. I'm sure he understands this way better than most of us do. And wait a minute, does that mean that he could technically load up Silent Hill on the PS5 with a PS2 ISO and completely beat Nate to the punch. Here's the interesting thing about part 2, though. They say it's covering the next part of the exploit chain, so we'll see where that goes to. But it also covers PlayStation's response to the research. It hasn't been patched yet. It was at least disclosed to them apparently almost a year ago. And I'm curious what Sony's response is then to the PS2 emulator having a way to at least do things it's not supposed to, and potentially where that could lead. So interesting stuff there. I'll be curious what PlayStation had to say about it, and no timetable that I've seen on when Part 2 is being released, but I will link to this GitHub page down below, as well as the video that CTURT put out showcasing this exploit in action and being able to load up Klonoa 2 through Okage's emulator that was set up there. So interesting stuff, but let me know what you guys think about this one down below, because it really seems like the efforts to open up the PS5 have been continued to mount. So I'm curious how much longer until we just hear about a full-blown exploit on the PS5, and then all bets are off on that with Sony. Thanks, guys, for watching, and I'll see you next time.